Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. Just so you know, this explainer is a kind of compressed, structural companion to our deep dive. Today, we're examining the core system of shock politics, which Naomi Klein breaks down in her book, No is Not Enough. Okay, before we jump in, I want to make something super clear. This is not a summary of the book, and it is definitely not advice. What we're doing here is analyzing a system.
So here's our game plan. We're going to look at the shock politics system itself, what drives it, the incentives, its predictable outcomes, how it manages to stick around, and then we'll zoom out and see how it fits into the bigger picture. All right, let's get into it.
First things first, we've got to really pin down the system we're looking at. I mean, what are we really talking about when we use a term like shock politics?
So Naomi Klein has been looking at this for a while. She first dug into this tactic in her book, The Shock Doctrine, and she described it as this pretty brutal tactic of systematically using the public's confusion and disorientation right after a major collective shock to ram through these really radical pro-corporate policies. Okay, so let's put a clear definition on this. Shock politics. It's a system built on exploiting crises. It uses emergencies, those times when public attention is totally destabilized, and it uses that window to push through a pro-corporate agenda that would normally face a ton of opposition. That leads to the next big question, right? How does this thing actually work? To really get it, we have to look at the incentives, because at the end of the day, every system runs on them. And you can actually break it down into a pretty clear step-by-step logic. It's a machine for turning a public crisis into a private opportunity. So, a shock hits. Instantly, there's this feeling of urgency, right? We have to do something now. And that urgency just squeezes out all the time for public debate and careful thought. In that very tight window, access for elites and the power of the executive branch, they just swell. And boom, there's your opening to fast-track policies. To make this whole thing a bit more tangible, let's use a structural metaphor for it. Think of shock politics like a fire alarm, but it's a special kind of fire alarm. One that automatically unlocks doors that are usually only accessible to executives. So while everyone is panicking because of that fire alarm, a small group can quietly move policy through these corridors that are normally locked down by democratic oversight. And the key thing to get here is that this isn't random chaos. This whole process leads to some very predictable results. And this is where you see this huge gap between what it feels like is happening and what's actually happening structurally. From the public's point of view, what we see is chaos, instability, and a lot of political fighting. But underneath all that noise, the structural outcome is incredibly consistent. You get deregulation, privatization, and a continuous pipeline of wealth extraction. Which brings up a really important question. If these outcomes are so negative for the public, why on earth does the system keep going? You'd think it would just burn itself out, right? Well, it persists because it feeds itself. It's a self-reinforcing loop. Think about it. The policies that get passed during a shock, defunding public services, getting rid of safety regulations, those very things can make the next crisis even worse. And a worse crisis just creates a bigger opportunity for more shock politics. All the while, the media spectacle has us all glued to the surface-level drama, so the actual design of the system, the gears turning underneath, just goes completely unexamined. And this right here, this gets to the absolute core analytical point of our explainer. The crisis in perception is mistaking the spectacle for the structure. We treat politics like it's just a big personality clash, when the real system is an incentive machine that's literally turning instability into a way to capture how we're governed. Okay, so with that in mind, let's zoom out and see how this machine fits into the bigger picture. Because this shock system, it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It's nested inside even bigger global systems that actually make it more powerful. You've got the economics of platform media, which rewards sensationalism. You have decades of neoliberal policy that have already weakened our public institutions. And then you have accelerating climate-driven disasters, providing a steady stream of new shocks just waiting to be exploited. So when you understand this layered structure, it helps you see the mechanism instead of just getting lost in the chaos. And that really leads us to a final question to think about. If we stop seeing all this political chaos as just random noise, what other patterns start to become clear? Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis in perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.